The old stone building that housed the Harmony Creek Historical Society smelled of aged paper, beeswax polish, and faint lingering dust. For years, Eleanor had found solace within its quiet walls, dedicating her Tuesdays and Thursdays to organizing documents, cataloging artifacts, and ensuring the delicate balance of the past was maintained with care. It was volunteer work, unpaid, often unnoticed, but it gave structure and purpose to her days, a quiet counterpoint to the sometimes lonely rhythm of life after her husband George had passed. Eleanor was, by nature, a woman who noticed details, not just the grand narratives of history, but the small, telling things. A faint ink smudge on a soldier's letter that spoke of hurried writing. A barely perceptible tear in a velvet curtain that hinted at years of use. The precise angle at which a teacup should be placed on its saucer for perfect balance. To Eleanor, these minutiae weren't trivial. They were threads in the intricate tapestry of time, each holding a piece of the larger story. Her meticulousness, a trait she had cultivated since childhood, gave her a quiet sense of control in a world that often felt unpredictable. Growing up with several younger siblings, life had been a cheerful chaos, and keeping her own small corner perfectly ordered had been her sanctuary, a place where she could impose a sense of calm. This carried into her adult life, a quiet discipline that brought her comfort. This meticulousness, however, wasn't always appreciated by everyone. The younger volunteers, bright-eyed and enthusiastic, but often less patient, would sometimes tease her gently. "Still polishing the hinges, Eleanor?" young Tom would joke, referring to her habit of ensuring even the unseen parts of display cases were free from grime. Sarah, who preferred arranging exhibits based on color palettes rather than strict chronology, would sigh when Eleanor pointed out a date discrepancy on a label. "Oh, Eleanor, does it really matter?" she'd ask, implying that such tiny inaccuracies wouldn't be noticed by casual visitors, that the overall effect was what counted. Even George, bless his practical soul, had sometimes been perplexed by her need for precision. She remembered one evening, early in their marriage, when she had spent an hour rearranging the books on a shelf, not by subject or author, but by height, creating a perfectly graded slope. George had walked in, smiled fondly, and said, "My dear, the books hold the same stories, no matter how tall they are." He hadn't meant to be unkind, but she'd felt a familiar prickle of being misunderstood, of her deep-seated need for order being seen as merely a quirky compulsion, rather than a way of honoring the past, of giving things their due. The Historical Society was currently buzzing with a different kind of energy. A major grant had been secured, finally allowing for the restoration of the building's magnificent but sadly neglected cupola. More importantly, the grant came with a visit from Mrs. Agnes Fletcher, a formidable figure in the world of historical preservation, known for her sharp mind and even sharper tongue. Mrs. Fletcher's approval could open doors to future funding and recognition, while her disapproval, well, no one wanted to think about that. The society director, Mr. Harrison, a kind but somewhat disheveled man more passionate about local folklore than structural integrity, was in a state of nervous flutter about the upcoming inspection. He'd instructed the volunteers to focus on the main attractions, dusting the portraits of founding families, polishing the antique furniture until it gleamed, and ensuring the visitor's log was neatly presented, front and center. Added to the tension was the recent appointment of Mr. Davies to the Society's board. Mr. Davies was a successful businessman, new to the town, with a reputation for efficiency and a rather elevated opinion of himself. He saw the Historical Society not just as a place of history, but as a social and political stepping stone. He spoke loudly about modernizing, about streamlining, about attracting a more influential clientele. He was dismissive of the longtime volunteers, particularly those like Eleanor, who didn't fit his image of polished importance. He valued grand gestures over quiet dedication, visibility over substance. Eleanor, however, couldn't ignore the little things. While Sarah artfully arranged brochures based on color, and Tom struggled with a wobbly display stand, polishing surfaces until they shone, Eleanor found herself drawn to the dusty, rarely visited storage room behind the archives. It was here that discarded items, uncatalogued donations, and forgotten boxes lay in jumbled heaps. Mr. Harrison had told them repeatedly not to bother with it for the inspection. Mrs. Fletcher won't see that mess. Focus on the public areas, please. Mr. Davies agrees. Presentation is key. But Eleanor saw it. She saw the dust bunnies the size of mice, the precarious stack of old newspapers yellowing at the edges, the way a broken picture frame lay carelessly tossed on top of a fragile textile bundle. Her hands itched to bring order to the chaos, not just for the sake of tidiness, but because these were fragments of the past, waiting to be understood, to be honored with care. Ignoring the director's instructions and Mr. Davies's implicit disdain for anything deemed unimportant, she spent hours back there in the weeks leading up to the visit, carefully sorting, gently cleaning, making small, meticulous notes in her personal notebook about items that seemed potentially significant but were simply labeled MISC. She found a stack of faded photographs tucked inside a rusty tin box labeled Old Bills. Most were blurry landscapes or unidentified portraits, but at the bottom she found a small, sepia-toned portrait of a stern-looking woman and two young girls. Written faintly on the back in spidery ink were the words, "Eliza and her daughters, 1898, keepers of the trust." Nothing more. It piqued her interest, and she added it to a small pile of items to investigate further when she had time, filing away the name Eliza in her mind. Alongside the preparations for Mrs. Fletcher's visit, there was another guest expected, one invited by Mr. Harrison more out of courtesy than expectation of significant contribution. This was Mr. Thomas Abernathy, a very old gentleman from one of the town's founding families, quietly respected, known for his deep, though private, connection to the town's history. He rarely attended society events, preferring his quiet life at his rambling old farm on the outskirts of town. He was Eleanor's late mother's cousin, a man who felt more like a gentle uncle to her, someone she visited occasionally, finding comfort in his quiet wisdom and deep love for the land and its stories. Mr. Davies had scoffed when Mr. Harrison mentioned inviting him. Abernathy, isn't he just some old farmer? What could he possibly add to an event like this? We need influential people, Mr. Harrison, people with vision and resources, not relics of the past. Mr. Harrison, ever the kind soul, had simply insisted, "Mr. Abernathy's family is deeply connected to Harmony Creek's history, Mr. Davies. It's only right he be invited." The day of Mrs. Fletcher's visit dawned bright and clear, highlighting every speck of dust the volunteers had missed despite their hurried efforts. Everyone was dressed in their best, a nervous energy crackling in the air. Eleanor wore her simple, sensible gray dress and comfortable shoes, her usual uniform for work at the society, her hair neatly pinned back. She helped set out refreshments, ensuring the napkins were folded just so, and the sugar lumps were neatly arranged, a small corner of perfect order in the bustling hall. As the other volunteers buzzed around, putting last-minute touches on displays, she felt a familiar sense of being on the periphery, useful for quiet tasks but not central to the important show Mr. Davies and Mr. Harrison were so focused on presenting. She saw Mr. Abernathy arrive, a small, unassuming figure in a plain suit, his kind eyes taking everything in. She offered him a quiet smile, which he returned with a gentle nod. Mrs. Fletcher arrived, a woman with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, eyes that seemed to miss nothing, and a posture that radiated authority. Mr. Harrison, looking even more disheveled than usual, greeted her effusively, leading her through the main exhibit rooms. Mr. Davies was close behind, offering confident, bordering on boastful commentary on the society's future plans. The volunteers trailed behind, offering nervous smiles, eager to impress the formidable visitor. Mrs. Fletcher praised the restoration work on the cupola, nodding approvingly at the polished antique furniture. She asked intelligent, probing questions about the prominent families featured in the portraits, about the town's founding principles. Sarah confidently spoke about the history of local agriculture, reciting facts she had memorized. Tom explained the provenance of a set of antique tools, gesturing enthusiastically. Mr. Davies jumped in frequently, steering the conversation towards the society's financial health, its potential for growth, the influential people he intended to bring onto the board. Eleanor stood quietly at the back, observant, ready to fetch more tea if needed, but mostly listening, her eyes drawn to the details others overlooked. As they moved towards the archive's entrance, a less polished section, Mrs. Fletcher paused. She wasn't looking at the grand, leather-bound ledgers Mr. Harrison was proudly displaying just inside the doorway. She was looking at a small, almost hidden corner near the doorway itself, where a stack of old journals sat on a trolley, waiting to be moved to a storage area. One of them was slightly askew, and a single dried leaf had fallen onto the cover. Her sharp eyes also noticed a faint, almost invisible scuff mark on the trolley itself, and the ghost of a cobweb filament clinging to the edge of the shelf nearby. Small signs of oversight. "Mr. Harrison," Mrs. Fletcher said, her voice clear and caring, cutting through Mr. Davies's latest remark about future endowments. "These appear to be the original journals from the early days of the settlement, yes?" "Oh, yes, Mrs. Fletcher," Mr. Harrison said, stepping forward quickly, a nervous smile on his face. "Valuable records indeed. We're hoping to get them properly cataloged eventually. Mr. Davies feels our focus should be on more visible improvements first, of course." He glanced at Mr. Davies, seeking his approval. "Eventually?" Mrs. Fletcher's eyebrow rose slightly, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement that nevertheless conveyed a wealth of meaning. Her gaze fell on the misplaced journal, the dried leaf. "Maintaining a historical society is not merely about displaying artifacts or hosting galas, Mr. Harrison. Or Mr. Davies," she added, turning her sharp gaze onto the flustered board member. "It is about preservation. It is about respect for the past, down to the smallest, most fragile detail. A single misplaced item, a speck of dust in a forgotten corner, a lack of care for the core materials. These can speak volumes about the underlying health and dedication of an institution, regardless of how shiny the surface may appear." Her words hung in the air, a quiet, potent rebuke. Mr. Harrison looked even more flustered. Mr. Davies's confident smirk vanished, replaced by a look of annoyance. The younger volunteers exchanged uneasy glances. Eleanor felt a familiar ache. The world valued the big picture, the grand gestures, the polished surfaces, while the quiet, persistent work of caring for the details went unnoticed, sometimes even scorned. Then Mrs. Fletcher's gaze, sharp and discerning, found Eleanor standing quietly at the edge of the group, her attention focused on the trolley of journals. Eleanor hadn't polished these specific journals or that particular trolley, but she had spent years tending to the small, forgotten things throughout the building, the things deemed unimportant by others. Something in her posture, her quiet attentiveness, perhaps the simple honesty of her sensible dress amidst the others' more formal attire, seemed to catch Mrs. Fletcher's professional eye. "And you, madam?" Mrs. Fletcher addressed Eleanor directly, her tone shifting slightly, becoming one of genuine inquiry. "What is your role here? I don't believe we've been introduced." Eleanor stepped forward, feeling a surge of nervousness, the eyes of everyone in the room suddenly on her. "I'm a volunteer, Mrs. Fletcher, Eleanor Vance. I mostly work in the archives, organizing and cataloging." Mrs. Fletcher nodded slowly, her gaze unwavering, assessing. "I see. Ms. Vance, do you notice details, madam? The small things that others might overlook? The history that isn't on the prominent display?" Eleanor hesitated for a fraction of a second, the memories of George, of the younger volunteers' gentle teasing, flashing through her mind. But looking into Mrs. Fletcher's discerning eyes, she felt a strange sense of permission, a recognition she hadn't expected, a sense that this woman, at least, understood. "Yes, Mrs. Fletcher," she replied, her voice soft but steady, gaining strength as she spoke. "I suppose I do. The details. They tell the story, don't they? Sometimes the most important stories are found in the things that seem small or out of place." She thought of the photograph of Eliza and her daughters. A slow smile, one of genuine acknowledgement, spread across Mrs. Fletcher's face. It wasn't a warm, effusive smile, but it was genuine, a sign of recognition, of respect earned. "Indeed they do, Ms. Vance. They tell the most important stories of all." She paused, her gaze sweeping over Mr. Davies, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable, then back to Eleanor. "It takes a particular kind of dedication to see the value in the overlooked, to understand that a historical society's true strength lies in the integrity of its entire collection, not just the parts deemed worthy of public display. Just as Mrs. Fletcher seemed poised to deliver more pointed remarks, Mr. Thomas Abernathy, who had been standing quietly by the wall, watching the interaction with a gentle but alert expression, stepped forward. His voice, though soft, carried a natural authority that commanded attention. "Agnes," Mr. Abernathy said, using a familiar tone that surprised many in the room, "perhaps I might add a small point." Mrs. Fletcher turned, her expression softening slightly. "Thomas, please do." Mr. Davies blinked in confusion. Thomas Abernathy, calling Mrs. Agnes Fletcher by her first name. Who was this old man? Mr. Abernathy walked slowly towards the trolley of journals, towards Eleanor. He stopped beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Eleanor is quite right, Agnes," he said, his kind eyes meeting Mrs. Fletcher's. "The details are everything. For instance, these journals," he gestured to the trolley, "they contain the daily records kept by my great-grandmother, Eliza Abernathy, and her daughters." He paused, looking at the journals with a quiet reverence. Eliza wasn't just recording crop yields or weather. She was the keeper of the original trust that established this society. Her meticulous notes, her dedication to detail, ensured its survival through difficult times. He smiled gently at Eleanor. "A quality she seems to have passed down, perhaps?" He turned his gaze, which held a surprising depth, onto Mr. Davies. "This society, Mr. Davies, was not built on grand pronouncements or maximizing assets. It was built on the quiet, persistent work of individuals like Eliza, and like Eleanor here, who understood that true value lies in care, in preservation, in honoring the past with dignity, even the smallest parts of it. My family's ongoing support for this society has always been based on that principle, on the understanding that the entire collection, from the grandest portrait to the most faded photograph, matters equally, and that the people who dedicate themselves to its meticulous care are the true custodians of its legacy." He straightened slightly, his posture gaining quiet stature. "I must confess, Mr. Harrison, Mr. Davies, I found some of the recent emphasis on superficial improvements concerning, and the lack of respect shown for the foundational work that keeps this place alive deeply disappointing. If the priorities of the Harmony Creek Historical Society are shifting away from dedicated preservation and respect for its core values, then perhaps my family's significant annual endowment, and indeed the substantial bequest currently under consideration, may need to find a different home." Silence descended upon the room, thick and heavy. Mr. Harrison looked faint. Mr. Davies's face, moments before flushed with annoyance, was now pale, his eyes wide with shock and dawning horror. The old farmer was not just a relic. He was the quiet power behind the throne, the source of significant funding, the man whose family was the history Mr. Davies had claimed to represent. And he had just, with quiet dignity, delivered a devastating indictment. Mrs. Fletcher nodded slowly, her expression confirming Mr. Abernathy's standing. "Mr. Abernathy raises crucial points," she stated, her voice cutting through the silence. "The National Trust places immense value on institutions that demonstrate a deep commitment to the entirety of their collection and the people who care for it. Superficiality, disregard for detail, and lack of respect for dedicated staff and volunteers are, frankly, unacceptable." Later, after Mrs. Fletcher and Mr. Abernathy had departed, Mrs. Fletcher, with a firm handshake for Eleanor and a promise to be in touch, Mr. Abernathy, with another gentle smile and a whispered, "Your great-grandmother would be proud, dear." Mr. Harrison approached Eleanor. He looked humbled, enlightened, and more than a little shaken. "Eleanor," he said, his voice full of respect and genuine awe, "Mrs. Fletcher was right. Mr. Abernathy was right. I apologize if I haven't always appreciated your unique contribution, your attention to detail, your knowledge. It's exactly what we need. That storage room, I peeked in there after they left. It's incredible what you managed. The way you sorted those photographs, Eliza and her daughters. I never knew about the trust. Thank you, Eleanor. You saved us, I think." The younger volunteers, Witnessing Mr. Harrison's sincere apology and hearing the full weight of Mr. Abernathy's quiet power and praise, looked at Eleanor with new eyes. Sarah approached her shyly. Eleanor, about that date discrepancy, could you show me how you check the cross-references? I'd like to learn to be more thorough. Tom offered to help her move some of the heavier archival boxes from the storage room, handling them with a new, careful respect. Mr. Davies was conspicuously absent, having been called into a tense, private meeting with Mr. Harrison regarding his future role on the board. Eleanor felt a warmth spread through her chest, deeper and more satisfying than any external praise. It wasn't just about being right, it was about being seen, truly seen, for the quiet strength she possessed, the value in the way her mind worked, the importance of the dedication she brought to the overlooked corners of history. The Harmony Creek Historical Society underwent a significant, positive transformation in the following months. With Mr. Abernathy's continued, now openly directed support, grants flowed in, specifically earmarked for preservation projects that required meticulous work, cataloging the entire collection, not just the highlights. Mr. Harrison, with Mrs. Fletcher's strong recommendation and Mr. Abernathy's full backing, formally asked Eleanor to step into a new, paid position, collections manager, overseeing archiving, preservation, and detailed record keeping. It was a role that was essentially a promotion, giving her the authority, resources, and recognition to implement the high standards she had always quietly maintained. She trained the other volunteers and new staff, not just on procedures, but on the philosophy of caring for the past, teaching them to look beyond the obvious, to find the stories in the smudges and the significance in the seemingly insignificant. She shared her love for the details and, in doing so, fostered a new appreciation among the staff and the community. Her life gained a new dimension. She was no longer just a quiet volunteer. She was an expert, a respected leader, a vital heart of the institution. The sting of past misunderstandings and feeling overlooked faded, replaced by the quiet confidence of purpose, belonging, and profound fulfillment. She still loved her quiet routine at home, her perfectly aligned teacups, the meticulous order of her own small world. But now that world had expanded, and her particular way of seeing, once dismissed as a quirk, was finally recognized as the valuable gift it had always been. She had found a place where her attention to the smallest detail made all the difference in preserving the largest story of all, and where her quiet dedication had in fact saved the day.